Mr Speaker, I think it's important at the second reading stage of the Canterbury Earthquake Response and Recovery Bill that I declare, while I and my Labor colleagues are supporting this bill, I do so with a degree of nervousness for some of the provisions contained within the bill. And I do so as the MP for Christchurch Central, which, with all due acknowledgement to the damage inflicted in Kaiapoi, in Bexley and other parts of Canterbury, it is Christchurch Central that has suffered the most damage and certainly the most dollar damage to buildings, particularly but not exclusively across the CBD of our city. And of course, all of you will know that it is the heritage that is the hallmark of Christchurch. It is what brings the tourists to our city. It enriches our lives, and it has one of the best preserved CBDs in Australasia and beyond. And we know that this bill is a response to a once-in-a-generation event, a disaster which we are not likely, we all hope and pray, to ever see again in our lifetimes. And we know that there are a number of non-compliant activities within the city and within the region that are currently affected by and currently permitted by the state of emergency, which the indications are will lift at midday tomorrow. So the need for the bill is there in terms of what needs to happen in terms of progress for our city, both with the first phase of demolition to unsafe buildings, buildings which definitively cannot be restored, and then to the next phase, which is the rebuilding of our city, so that can happen in rapid fashion. And I guess the way I see this bill is that it's a test of good faith, that it would not be in anybody's interests if that good faith was not fulfilled. But at the back of my mind is the fact that the last time I spoke on such legislation was our Environment Canterbury Temporary Commissioners and Improved Water Management Bill, passed under urgency prior to Easter. And of course that was not hallmarked by the sort of disaster we face. So I'm not making a direct comparison, but obviously it is in my mind. And when we talk about preservation of buildings, I understand that a small business in my electorate, the Canterbury Cheesemonger's shop, has unfortunately fallen to demolition. I visited that building twice early last week at the call of Martin, the cheesemonger, whose own building had been declared sound, a small building, but the building to both sides of it had been very badly damaged. And we were trying to see if there was some way of preserving that business, that building, when the demolition took place of the surrounding damaged buildings. And I understand, I cannot vouch for this, that unfortunately that shop has gone today. So I guess that might be a bit of a signal to us of the sorts of challenges we're going to face in the demolition phase, that we need to try and protect and preserve as much of our heritage building. This was not an iconic building by any means, but still a small turn-of-the-century building which added some character to our city, and it will be a loss if that has gone. We will wait and see if that was something that absolutely had to happen or may possibly have been avoided. So there are big questions for us as we go through this bill and what lies beyond. And I think one of the best things that we as local electorate MPs can do is ensure that we provide the best possible information to our constituents. And I'm pleased to say that electorate MPs have swung into action last night. Leanne Dalzell held a meeting attended by 500 people. She had an Earthquake Commission representative there and others assisting 500 people who wanted to know issues about insurance, Earthquake Commission cover and the like. I know that my colleague Clayton Cosgrove has a similar meeting coming up tomorrow night in Kaiapoi. Myself and Jerry Brownlee have meetings in our electorates on Thursday night with EQC staff present. I'll also have senior staff from AMI and hopefully other insurance companies present at my meeting at Shirley Intermediate at 5 o'clock on Thursday night. And then I'm doing a similar meeting at the same venue at 5 o'clock on Friday night to provide the best information we can. And I know that both Ruth Dyson and Leanne Dalzell have got meetings planned also through the weekend and into next week to try and provide that sort of advice and information to their constituents. That's truly, truly important. But going back to this bill, I think that while we have some of the best heritage remaining in Australasia in Christchurch's CBD, the track record has not been flash. We have lost too many buildings prior to the quake already. We have a cumbersome city plan which has done very little to protect our heritage buildings. I think of buildings like the very ugly Rebel Sport building on the corner of Colombo Street and Morehouse Ave, a big, ugly tilt slab monstrosity which somehow or other has managed to invade our cityscape. And I know, for instance, that more is on its way. The press room, the printing room of the press was demolished, immediately adjoining my now vacated office in Worcester Street. The replacement for it on that site are 4 multi-storey buildings stretching to 20 stories high. This is within 100 metres of the square, the centre, the heart of Christchurch. How that could get through is beyond me because the city plan allows it. And my concern is, and what we need to have, everybody holding hands on and making sure this legislation does not provide carte blanche for further development of that very ugly tilt slab kind of construction which does nothing for a cityscape, be it Christchurch or anywhere else. We have a unique series of facades across Christchurch, a unique set of buildings which have added a huge amount to the fabric of our city, to its beauty, to its character, to its iconic status. We are at the moment seeking UNESCO acknowledgement for the Gothic revival buildings of our city to put that on the world map in that respect, and it would just be a disaster. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker, not a good week to have the flu. It would be a disaster if we see an enhancement of the prospects for ugly tilt slab kind of designs to replace the loss of some of those heritage buildings, which we acknowledge is happening, in some instances has to happen. There is a limit to how much can be restored both physically and financially. We have to protect the best of what we've got, rebuild the best of what we've got, and acknowledge some will go. But it's clear we can't save everything, and what we are concerned about is to ensure that this bill allows the best of what is left to be retained, to be protected, to be preserved, to be enhanced, and when other new buildings have to be built, that they are not, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, they are not ugly buildings which will add nothing to the vibrancy of our city. There are 2 acknowledgements I'd like to make about people, groups of people. One is the Orion Line staff who've done a fantastic job over the last 10 days restoring power across the city, Mr. Speaker. And I'd also like to acknowledge also those people in media who've generally done a very good job, but just one message in respect of that. I noted comments from Peter Townsend of the Canterbury Chamber of Commerce and Employers, noting he'd been interviewed by a Perth radio station, and the station said, what was he doing now that Christchurch's CBD had been obliterated? I want the message to go out very clearly. 98% of Christchurch CBD is standing. Most people are back at work. The city is functioning very normally, and I think that people should take note that while we've sustained a considerable amount of damage, our city is up and running and looking toward a viable future with buildings restored and new buildings that come in and complement the historic facades of our cityscape.
Point of order.